The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at 11 a.m. Central Time on your Wednesday. We know that you all, as educators and school leaders, are so busy. And so we're so grateful that you chose to spend this time with us. So we're excited to have Katie Wiens, Dr. Katie Wiens, the Executive Director of CESA, with us today, as well as Brian Jensen, my colleague, who is an executive search consultant with us at Vanderbloemen. And I am Holly Tate, Vice President of Business Development at Vanderbloemen. And Brian and I spend the majority of our week thinking and praying for you as educators and school leaders. And so we are thrilled to be able to offer you these resources during this time of uncertainty and really innovation, where a lot of us are having to figure out problems that we've never even seen before. And so we are excited to be joined by Katie Wiens, who is an expert in our field. I'm going to let Katie share her story, but has many years of experience in the trenches with you, leading schools really all over the country. So Katie, I would love to turn it over to you for you to share your story and what brought you to be the Executive Director of CESA.
Well, hey, thank you. It's good to be here with you, Holly and Brian, and all of you that are on the webinar. It's a crazy time for sure. So I'm glad to be here with you, and thanks to Vanderbloemen for leveraging your resources here to support Christian schools and churches. It means a ton. This is a crazy time, and we need each other's support and wisdom as we navigate all of the challenges and all of the opportunities that are before us. So my story, I could probably go in a few directions on this one, but I guess it'd probably be helpful to know that I grew up in a rural Minnesota town, a small town, a big family of super bright, intellectually curious, hardworking people. I'm the first in my family to go to college, but the curiosity that was instilled in me there and the desire to find solutions led me to become a science teacher. In the first years of my career, by God's grace, I ended up in one of the best public schools in the country. I learned a lot about what quality education should and should not look like, as well as some of the barriers to providing quality education. And so from there, I was bit by the Christian school bug when I began working at Boston Trinity Academy. It was a new Christian school in the heart of Boston. And I've really been hooked ever since, working in a lot of different capacities in K-12 and college settings, as well as doing quite a bit of research on private schooling. It was in Boston that CESA was born, and I was a part of the founding of that, along with several incredible Christian school leaders. So I worked for CESA for about 5 years in its infancy. I was the director of academic advancement, and then I took about a 3-year break because the organization was getting too big for us to manage with our other commitments. So I said goodbye to this little baby for about 3 years. But when the CESA board was looking for a new executive director, it was the right time to take on the role. So for the past year, I've been very grateful to work alongside all the amazing Christian school leaders that are a part of CESA.
Well, it has been phenomenal to see CESA thrive under your leadership. We have been honored to partner with you over the last year. We're at the symposium in DC last fall and just gotten to connect with so many of the CESA leaders and community. And so we're grateful for your leadership. Before we dive into hearing from you on how schools can survive and then also thrive during this time, Brian Jensen, I would love for you to share a bit about your story and what your days look like as an executive search consultant on our team at Vanderbloemen.
Sure. And funny to answer what my days look like today versus 2 weeks ago. So let me try and do my best. I also grew up in the great state of Minnesota. So we have a healthy Midwest contingent here today. I went to school in Minneapolis for my undergrad, and then actually started working there. So I've spent 15 years in Christian higher education, first at North Central University in Minneapolis, and then I spent 12 years at Geneva College, just north of Pittsburgh, and finished my time there as the Vice President of Student Development, and then started doing consulting and started having conversations with Vanderbloemen as we strategically expanded into the Christian education and nonprofit world. And so now my days are spent mostly working with Christian schools and other Christian nonprofits, helping them navigate anything and all things really, but I also spend most of my time doing executive search services for clients looking for key leadership positions to fill their leadership teams. And it's been an amazing journey, and very thankful to the Lord as he's brought us into this space. And now we reside in beautiful Houston, where it's already too hot. Sorry to my friends in not hot places right now.
Right.
It really is. It's supposed to be a high of 91 degrees in March.
Oh.
It is just bizarre. It's bizarre. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you to both of you for sharing your story, and I'm excited to learn from you today. For everyone who's joining us, I want to introduce you to your GoToWebinar side panel, where there is a question box. We would love to, first of all, hear where you're joining us from. So please chat me in the question box there. And then we would also love for you, as you're listening today, to share your questions, because we're going to leave a lot of time at the end of this. We want to make sure that we're able to answer your questions in real time, as we know that many of you are struggling today to figure out, how do we get virtual learning up and ready? How do I lead my team remotely? Any of those questions that you're thinking about, we would love for Katie and Brian to be able to answer that on this webinar today. But for now, Katie, would love to hear from you on what are the biggest challenges that you're currently seeing Christian educators face during this COVID-19 crisis?
Yeah, that's a great question. With the CESA network, we've been spending time every week. We've got 9 different focus groups meeting weekly just to discuss our own positions, what's happening in our local context. And so the qualitative researcher in me is loving it because I can get all of these different themes that are coming up and the strands that are kind of running throughout all of the different positions that we're seeing. So, I don't think anybody 3 weeks ago would have thought we would be here discussing this today. I mean, the pace of change and the need to be so extraordinarily nimble and flexible in both continuing that our students are learning and continuing to make sure that our school's business and advancement practices are setting our schools up to be strong both this year and next year. I mean, there are so many areas needing attention, and many of them are needing attention right now. So there's so much urgency with so many of these things that I think it's providing some challenges and a whole lot of opportunities, which I'm very excited about. I think most of the plans that we had 3 weeks ago are pretty much irrelevant and unhelpful today. So we have to be acting so quickly, but not impulsively, right? To figure out how to meet our missions. So most of our schools have made the transition to virtual learning absolutely beautifully. I've been very impressed with the work that our schools are doing with respect to that student experience. Each one's a little bit different, and each one of them is doing a great job of kind of reflecting the priorities and the missions of that school. So one school that I know is doing daily meetings for each division, middle school, upper school, lower school, where the hundreds of the students get together to pray, to do devotionals, and that's a huge deal. They're sending out devotionals for each family to do together, which is great. Advisory groups are intact. College counselors are on the ready. Kids are doing PE workouts at home, along with all the academic things. So, it speaks to the fact that the school's knowing that the education is more than the academics, and it speaks to the fact that people are responding to that, and they're responding to that really, really quickly. And so I'm excited about that. Independent schools are built to be nimble and built to be flexible. And that's something that I think is really exciting and a huge opportunity to distinguish us from the pack as we respond to this on a more global scale. So, I think there's a ton of challenges that are certainly pressing right now, certainly on the student experience, but also in terms of our business practices. And I think that's one of the things that is more urgent right now. So, leading schools during these times are requiring us to think about our constituents in very different ways, and real frankly, in different cross sections of time. So what our students need right now is different than what they needed 3 weeks ago. And it's actually going to be different forever as a result of what we're experiencing in this moment. So our teachers, our donors, our potential families, our current parents, and we're all in that same situation, right? So while this crisis has highlighted the importance of having disaster plans and dedicating time to make contingency plans for any range of crises, many of those strategic goals that we were working on 3 weeks ago just don't matter right now. We're having to change those. And so especially as they relate to the logistics of advancement strategy. So that's one of the most pressing things that I'm seeing right now. What are we doing with our budget? Huge questions about the future of our enrollment. You know, tuition, revenue, predicting what seems to be unpredictable right now. And so I think our leaders are also being very much challenged by the need to care for all of our constituents and take on that pastoral role that Christian schools have both the responsibility and the gift of having. So, you know, I think how are we communicating with all of our constituents in the right amount, with the right tone, you know, for all these different people who are experiencing this time in such different ways. So, you know, that's one of the areas, you know, how are we maintaining momentum that we had in admission and fundraising and buzz around town? I think those are the most urgent demands that our leaders are dealing with.
That's fantastic, Katie. And one of the things you said early on that I think is key, and I haven't heard anyone verbalize it like this yet, is that we have to be agile and flexible, but not act impulsively. And that is so critical. And I know that so many Christian leaders, especially heads of schools or administrators or principals, are really built for moments like this, with that hybrid of the administrator and the pastoral heart. And so it's been really neat to see leaders step up during this time. Brian, what would you add to what Katie is seeing? I mean, you work with Christian schools all over the country every day. What are the biggest challenges that you're seeing our school clients face?
Yeah, I would, Katie, thank you for sharing what you did, and I would reflect on those as probably the top of the funnel challenges right off the bat. I mean, it's so funny to think about how fast this really happened. I mean, so everybody's trying to figure out the how to respond in such a quick fashion when we weren't thinking about these things just 2-3 weeks ago. And so, but the big questions that come up right away are, what does the future hold? Period. I mean, that's just a big question. Will we finish school this year? Will we have to finish online this year? Will we ever come back to physical presence this year? What does September look like? I mean, people are starting to wonder, will we be back in session in September? There's so many questions. And what does this do to our enrollment? I mean, I've heard that from every school. What does this do for enrollment? And how do we put contingency plans together for right now? How do we put contingency plans together for a sharp drop in enrollment? Should we put plans together for a drop in enrollment of 5% and 25% and 50%? I mean, people are there's so many question marks. And also in the midst of it, hopeful questions. How can we innovate through this? How can we change what we're doing? I'm fascinated by some of the schools who 3 weeks ago had zero capacity to do distance learning, and now today they're up and running with distance learning. I mean, it's pretty incredible to see how schools have pivoted and innovated in the time of necessity. But also, what does it mean for innovation? Katie was mentioning things may not go back to quote normal ever again. So what does that mean for innovation when things return to some sense of normalcy? But how do we capture our innovative spirit right now and think maybe differently about some of the things we're doing? I also hear about connection. One of the great things about Christian schools is that they're typically smaller settings than a larger public might be. And a huge factor in the success of their school is personal connection. So how are we connecting as a staff? How are we connecting to our students through this? How are we doing academic support? I've been going back and forth with a colleague at Baylor University who's trying to put resources together for student academic support through online measure when you can't physically sit down with a student and tutor or academic coaching. And so thinking creatively about those things. And then, like Katie, I continue to hear fundraising as a top level concern. That's across my schools and my nonprofits right now. Obviously, that's tied into what the economy is experiencing through this. What's it going to do to our donor base? Many of these organizations and schools are the same, have their largest fundraising events in the spring, and those have been canceled. So what does it look like to engage our donor base in different and new and innovative ways so that we don't see a sharp drop in our development efforts. I think those are just real concerns people are seeing right now.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I want everybody to take away from this time together today is that you're not alone. Regardless of what you're thinking about or struggling with, this is the time to really pull together as a community. And I know that there's, CESA is there, ACSI is there, NAIS is there. There's so many organizations out there, our team at Vanderbloemen, that are here to help. And so whether it's something like, how do we get online learning going, or what do I do about this development situation that I'm struggling with, whatever it might be, would definitely encourage everybody to reach out and don't be afraid to ask for help, because there's so many people out there that have been through not this type of crisis, but crisis before, that can and are ready and willing to jump in and help. I would love to hear from our audience. I got Harry. Harry let us know that they are a Google school and they use RenWeb. So I'd love to hear what other technology that folks are using that has been helpful to you during this time. So feel free to go to the question box on your GoToWebinar panel and let us know what type of technology you're using. That would be a really helpful thing for us to all learn and share with each other. So Katie, this is a huge question that I'm about to ask you, and you've had maybe 48 hours to think about it. But I would just love to hear from you, how can institutional leaders, whether they're a leader at a secondary school or a higher education institution, or maybe even a nonprofit that works with school leaders, what should every school leader be thinking about now to survive right now, and then ultimately to set them up to thrive after we get through this crisis?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a great question, and thankfully I've had more than 48 hours to think about it, because this is what we've been talking about at CESA, and this is really what the conversation should have been before a crisis like this happens, right? Like, what does it mean to thrive in a highly competitive world? And now we've got a few other variables that are there, but hey, I think this is the opportunity of a lifetime. I really think that this is a moment that can help us really think about who we are, what we do, and why we do it. And so, I don't mean to make light of the fact that there are some really hard problems that we're going to have to solve. And for some schools, it's going to be much, much more difficult than for others. I get that. And I don't want to, say that that's not important, but I do think that, throughout the conversations that I've been having with school leaders throughout the country, from admissions to heads to division principals, I'm encouraged to see leaders really taking the long view in this while they deal with the day-to-day. So I think it has to be a both and. I think in the day-to-day to survive, we have to be thinking about our people, right? Christian schools, to your point, Brian, we're about people, and we're about their relationship to God. We're about them thriving spiritually, emotionally, academically, all of those things. So I think in the day-to-day, we have to be thinking about our constituents and what they need from us, and how we can provide that with some of the barriers that are in place. So what does it mean to have a faculty meeting that really matters? What does it mean to provide support for our families, who many of them are two-income families who now have kids at home and are really trying to figure out what that looks like? How can we support them in ways that they're surprised by, right? In ways that they didn't expect, in ways that go way beyond what they could have expected from us. I think that's an opportunity of a lifetime for us to help us survive this little piece. But I think those types of opportunities can also help us thrive, right, in the future, by creating a narrative and by ensuring that our people really, really know what we're about. So I think, this is what great leaders have to do all the time, right? You lead with one foot in today and one foot in the future. But I think in times of crisis, it's really, really easy to ignore the future. And it's my belief that if our schools are going to thrive, we have to give ample attention to the future. So within our schools, I think this is a really excellent time to have the conversation about what we're really about. What is our mission and how are we going to fulfill it? Whether that is virtually, or whether that is back on our campuses where we're all really longing to be at this point in time. I think, we've got a very captive audience right now. Everybody's in their houses right now. Everybody's on social media a ton. Kids are learning, or our parents are learning way more about their kids' education than they probably ever have before, right? I'm learning tons of things about what my kid does at school that I had no idea what was going on. So we have a great opportunity right now to make sure that our mission is very visible and that it's compelling. And I think that can galvanize our story and create a much bigger buy-in than we may have had before, right? I mean, people come to schools for all kinds of different reasons, right? And those are prioritized on a very different scale. But if we're thinking about the future while we're trying to support all of our constituents today, we're going to create that story for them. And we're going to be able to use that story both internally and externally. So I think that is a huge opportunity to help us thrive and to help us reach people outside our organization right now, families outside of it. People are spending way more time on social media, right, than they have probably 3 weeks ago. And we've got the opportunity to capture that and capture an audience that can say, this is how we're different, right? This is how a Christian education looks different. And this is how we can care for your family. When families are needing more than just the academics, right? In addition to that, there are a lot of organizations, a lot of schools who are fumbling big time right now with continuity of learning, with all of the other aspects. And so we've got an opportunity to say every day, we've got this every day, right? We can do this for your kids in really substantial ways. And I think it can create a narrative that maybe was not there before. So I hope that those are a couple of the things that we can do. But I also think that, one of the things that is really important for us is really pouring into our teams right now. We're not walking around school campus. We're not driving to donor meetings. We're not on the sidelines. We're not in the audiences. So what we can be doing is really nourishing our teams, our leadership teams. And I think school leaders, especially heads of school and their academic teams, can really invest in their future by spending time nourishing one another, whether that's through book studies, whether that's through, there's a million different ways that you can do this just based on who you are as a leader. But I think that's a really great opportunity for us right now, is to be pouring into that. It's a great opportunity right now to be seeing who our rising stars are. Man, is it clear who's got it right now when push comes to shove. So I think taking the time to kind of look at our organizations and see who's killing it, right? And invest in them, mentor them, spend time with them, develop that capacity, because we've got a little bit more time right now. Sure, there are more urgent meetings, but we also do have some more time to be doing things like that. So I think that's a really helpful thing to be doing. I think maybe departments too, divisions. I've known one school that's using this time to have really strategic conversations about their line items. They're doing this great bullseye exercise where they're taking every single line item and placing it in order of importance. So it can help us realize if things are allocated the way that they should be based on our values and our priorities, right? If push comes to shove and we need to make some cuts, it makes it a whole lot easier after we've prioritized those things when we're not emotional about it. So I think there are lots of opportunities for us to say, hey, who are we? What are our priorities? And then really invest in that, make some decisions on that, and spend some time planning on that. So I'm excited because I'm seeing schools really have great conversations and really interested in asking the question of how is this going to change who we are in August and September.
That's great. I really appreciate what you said about this as an opportunity to make sure that our mission and vision and value that our parents are paying for, choosing to send them to a private Christian school, to be able to show that every day. So I'd love to hear from you. I'm gonna ask Brian a question. I'm gonna come back to you, Katie, so you can be thinking about this one while Brian's answering his. How school leaders can practically be doing that. So I'd love to hear some practical ways that they can infuse their mission and vision into this new way of learning that they're doing on a daily basis. And in the meantime, while you're thinking about that, Brian, would love to hear if you have anything to add as you've been talking with our clients that are on the front lines of education, of what they should be doing now to survive, and then how they can be thinking about thriving after COVID-19.
Yeah, happy to share some thoughts. I'm just reflecting on Katie's comment on helping our kids do schoolwork more than we ever have, and I'm just completely lost when I help them. So it's just so I'm learning a lot too, Kitty. Yeah, a couple things that would come to mind is one, reflecting on some of Katie's thoughts. I think that you know, prioritizing mission items, vision items. You're right that we've put some of our strategic planning exercises on hold, or they're changing. I don't think we can stop strategic planning. We need to keep doing that because the future is still intact for all we know right now. So what are some of the other, you know, I remember as a administrator, there was always a list of projects that never got done because I never, quote, had the time, right? And so Katie's right, you have more time, and who knows how long this will last. And as we sit with a little bit more discretionary time on our hands, what are those projects? How can you divvy up with your team projects that can be done now? Obviously, we're doing a lot of crisis response, but what else can we do in this time that we weren't quite expecting? I would also echo, rely on your team, you know, see who's your rising star or stars, and invest in your team, but also rely on your team, rely on your trusted leadership team. Everybody knows that this is something we've never faced before. And I don't think it's, somebody needs to say, I've got this figured out, I know exactly what to do, because none of us really know exactly what to do right now. So rely on your trusted team. And yeah, do things with excellence. If there's the local public school is fumbling through it, it's an opportunity for us to be a witness, one, as Christ's ambassadors, to care and love, but also to show how we do things really, really well, that we are going to continue to hold education in high regard and do it really, really well, even in the midst of difficulty. And then I would also say, and I'm just going to, this is just so important, that we need to pray hard. Establish new prayer practices through this for your family, for your school, for your sister schools, for those of us all experiencing this together. Pray intentionally and diligently. I was sharing yesterday with a client that, you know, one of the things that I think I reflect on during this time is, you know, in First Chronicles, it writes about the sons of Issachar. And we don't know a ton about the sons of Issachar, but we do know that the scriptures tell us that they were men who understood the times and knew what Israel should do. And so there's moments where we're all thinking, we don't know what to do, but relying on the wisdom from Christ and from the promises in the scriptures, we can have the wisdom to know what to do as we move forward, by trusting in the Lord and doing it to the best of our abilities as institutional leaders.
Absolutely. That's a good word. And we're actually going to be able to pray together before we hang up this webinar, which will be a much needed time, I know, for all of us. So just a quick reminder, it's almost time for Q&A. So Harry has been our #1 student on today's webinar. Thank you, Harry, for your thoughts and engagement. Would love to see questions that you have that Brian and Katie can answer for you before we end our time together. And you can do that in the question box in your GoToWebinar panel. So Katie, you mentioned earlier about how it's so important that right now we seize the opportunity to really make sure we're communicating and infusing our mission and vision and value that we're bringing as Christian educators into the learning experience, even at home. So what are some really practical ways that our educators that are listening today can do that, who might feel a little bit overwhelmed and not know where to start?
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think a lot of this has to do with us thinking about, you know, what are the aspects of our mission that we want to continue, that are the most critical parts of our mission, and how are we going to accomplish that? So I think as we consider what we're asking our students to do every day, we need to be thinking, and we need to be visually displaying, as well as, you know, just the expectation is there that all of those things are being considered. So, you know, we're Christian schools, and so I can't imagine that there's a Christian school out there that doesn't value continued faith development, right? Continued pouring into the spiritual lives of our students. So where is that? Where is that in the day? Is that a part of the learning that's taking place, even if it's not synchronous learning? Many of our schools are doing a little bit of synchronous and a little bit of asynchronous learning right now. So, are we expecting our students to still be in the Word? Are we still having our littles do their scripture memory and all of those types of things? Are we providing devotions for families to have together, things like that? So I think that's part of it. So as you go through the day, our division heads, our principals, really have a great opportunity to say, are all of those aspects there, so our parents can see it. I think most families at least kind of know more now about what a day looks like than they did. I mean, I'm the parent of a 9-year-old boy. Like, I get none when I ask what's going on at school, right? So I get a lot right now in terms of what his teachers value. And that means a lot to me as a parent, that I get to see that. So I think from the student experience, the parents are gonna be able to mirror that. But I also think this is a really great opportunity to have very streamlined communication between the school and home. So again, we don't want to over communicate, but we do have and I think there is a danger of that in today's quick pace world, that we're communicating too much too often, and it's all going to get lost. But there's one school that I know of that had an all school state of the school address via Zoom, right? They got better attendance than if it would have been on campus at this point in time, right? And so I think that there are ample opportunities to use this and to be able to tell the story of the decisions that you're making on a day-to-day basis. And it allows us to kind of peel away some of the distractions that we feel, when we're kind of in the grind and the daily part on campuses, to be able to tell that story better. I think we have to be leveraging social media to be able to tell those stories. And most of our communications and marketing people are very, very good at that. But I think there are great opportunities to do that, as well as, through our advancement teams with their communications with donors. I think thinking through how we are showing our commitment to our mission through thick and thin can pay dividends in terms of people's emotional commitments, as well as, financial commitments to the school.
That's great. Brian, are you seeing any of our clients or any of your connections in the education world doing anything creative to really tell that story that Katie is referring to of our mission and vision in this time?
Nothing that would be different than what Katie I mentioned. I think the use of social media needs to increase more than we ever have before. Make sure your website is accurate and create a landing page for during this spring semester, where people can go and see what's happening in ways that maybe they haven't been able to before, and direct people to a central place to share those stories, whether it's on your website, on your Facebook page, through different social media channels. Video, if you're a really overachiever, do daily, but maybe weekly video updates from the head of school, and have stories shared by the head of school that can be sent to all families and donors, so that donors know, hey, things are still moving along, we're still on mission, and we still value your support. So those are a couple of things that I think come to mind.
That's super helpful.
Yeah, and I think, Brian, I think you're right on that. I think we have a ton of opportunities to communicate those things, definitely through social media, but we also have a great opportunity, as a lot of schools are considering, what do we do with our coaches, with our staff that doesn't actually have a role right now? Use them to tell the story, employ them to make personal contact with our families, their current families, and utilize them, leverage them to make contact with families that are in the pipeline to tell that story. The more of those personal connections that we can get, we know a lot about the people who are interested in our school, right? Connect them. We can do that right now because we've got more of that time, and we have actually, more man hours to do the things that we would love to do on a regular basis.
That is brilliant, Katie. Yes, I think personal connection is the most value we can bring right now, as I think a lot of us won't even realize the feelings of isolation that we're going to feel for another couple of weeks or so. And so mobilizing your team to make those personal connections and connecting, who knows, by by just reaching out and asking parents, how are you doing? There might be a need that comes up that you know another parent can help them with. And so what a remarkable opportunity for us to use this time to make those personal connections. That's great. Well, let's talk about additional resources. Katie and Brian, would love to hear from you guys who've been in the trenches of education for a long time. What are those websites or resources out there right now? Katie, I know CESA has many resources that these educators who are listening today should really be aware of and be subscribing to during this time of crisis.
Yeah, so the CESA network is a little bit different than a lot of networks because we really do rely a lot on peer-to-peer interaction. So we are definitely leaning into that in big ways. We have weekly meetings, discussion groups, that are job alike, and that's been incredibly helpful for our people. So we're having hundreds of people a week just talk about their jobs and their tips. So that's really exciting. But I do think that there are a lot of great experts out there, especially, I am very focused on advancement right now, and CESA is very focused on our admissions, our development, our business types of things. So, organizations like Mission Advancement, Generis, Enrollment Catalyst, they're providing all kinds of great webcasts right now for specific problems. Brian, you mentioned the event cancellations. It's a big deal. There are a lot of auctions that are no longer going to be in person. And I know Mission Advancement is hosting a webinar on just that. So what do we do when this our event is canceled, and how do we maintain that momentum? So I think there are a lot of great resources out there, but our mission and what I think is really valuable is leaning into your peer network because there are a lot of great ideas, and our collective wisdom can be incredibly helpful as we meet these challenges going forward.
Absolutely. And we're actually going to be talking to one of the CESA peers and board members, Jay Ferguson, this same time and place next Wednesday. I texted him last week just to see how he was doing, and he said, "We're doing great. Virtual learning is up and ready." I'm like, of course, Jay Ferguson, why don't you come and share with the rest of us how you're able to do that? So he's going to be sharing specifically on virtual learning and leading your team remotely next Wednesday. And he's the head of school at Grace Community School in Tyler, a client of ours, board member of CESA, and just a wonderful, wonderful leader in the Christian school space. Brian, are there any other resources that you can think of that we should share with folks?
Nothing specific, although I just want to throw this out there. I would encourage schools not to feel like they have to develop all their own resources because there's so many good ones out there. And Katie said, rely on your peer networks. Go to the government websites that are already being just inundated with helpful resources and just link on your website. If you want to make sure that parents have something to see, just find good, trusted ones. There's plenty of them out there, and link those on your website, and don't create extra work for yourself right now.
Absolutely. And we're actually working on
I'd also,
sorry, go ahead, Katie. Go ahead.
No, I would just add that the NAIS website has spectacular resources that they are continuing to add every day. Great research-based, data-driven types of resources that are out there. So I'd invite you to take a look at those as well.
That's wonderful. And we're going to work on a page that's a hub for all of this because it's overwhelming to have to check all of these different websites every day. So we're going to be working on a hub that we'll send out to everybody on this call, where hopefully there will be a place where you can go and just have all of that all in one place. We also had an attendee recommend checking out Bloom's digital taxonomy, saying this is something we might want to start thinking about. And there's a link on teachonline.asu.edu. So if you want to, or actually, I guess I can put that. Look at me using technology. I'll put that in the chat feature here that Harry is recommending that we all consider. So, and if there's any resources that you know of that have been helpful to you during this time, please do send them to me in the question box, and I can make sure that we include them during or on that resource page that we are working on. All right, let's dive into Q&A. So Katie, one of the things that I know a concern that we've had from clients is, as they're thinking about the potential future of enrollment, what should schools be considering as options if they're seeing enrollment go down? And this, I'm talking about this, post COVID-19, but as they think towards the next school year, what are just some of the things they should be thinking about as those contingency plans if they're looking at their enrollment and looking at their finances and getting concerned?
Yeah, first of all, I would hope that schools already have these in place. Contingency plans should be a part of your annual planning, right? So there should always be, a best, a good, and a worst case scenario that's out there. Now, those worst case scenarios are probably going to have to dig a little deeper and go a little bit more into the negative, just to be safe with that. But if you are concerned with those two things, I think there are two options. Number one, you need to make sure that you're connecting with your families, and ensuring that they know their value in your community, and ensuring that you're going to take care of them. So I think many of our families have a lot of question marks. So even if those enrollment contracts have been signed, even if they think that they're going to be coming, we need to assure them that we're going to be okay. And so I think in trying to make sure that your financial aid budget is bigger for next year, I think is a big thing. I'm hoping that some of these auctions are moving from fund the needs to fund financial aid, to just have the community rally around their peers that there are going to be people that need it. So I think we need to, first of all, just make sure our families know that they're cared for and that we understand where they are right now. And I think that will go a long way. But I also think that, just making sure that you understand your priorities. So if you have done a bullseye exercise, you know where you can start reallocating people, and that you can start trimming some of the things that are not as central to your mission as they need to be. So I would say leading up to this, yes, make those contingency plans for 5, 10, 15, 20% enrollment declines. And, by the grace of God, we will not need to use them. But in doing that, making sure that your team is spending time prioritizing your budget and getting people rallied around both your mission and committed to it, so they recognize that this is not a luxury. Your Christian school tuition is not a luxury. This is a necessity. And you raising your kids the way that you want to raise them, so that they can be assured that this money is going to be well spent, and that we understand where they are and are willing to push in and support them. So I think there are a few things that we can do, both preventatively, but then also in planning our budgets that may see decline.
That's great. Brian, anything to add to that?
Well, just two things. One, it's time to all Christian schools are constantly thinking about enrollment and admissions, but it's time to just double down on efforts on admissions. Katie was mentioning if people are looking for some work to do right now and they're find things for them to do admissions wise. Connect with local churches, connect with local families, find ways to double down on your admissions work. And then the second thing is similar to Katie, the bullseye exercise, lining up your budget needs to be done. I refer to them as levers. So identify what levers are you willing to pull? Can you pull? Which levers would you pull first? What levers are you never gonna pull, no matter what, related to mission, to vision, to Christian education? What levers will you never pull? Which ones are you gonna pull first? And then which ones would be really painful to pull, but you're willing to pull them if you need to?
Super helpful. Thank you, guys. What would you say, Katie, to schools who are dealing with the anxiety from parents? What are some ways that you're seeing leaders who have those parents that are a little bit more high maintenance right now than usual? There's always those that are always a little bit high maintenance, but what are some proactive communication strategies or reach out strategies that you would recommend for educators to think through as far as parent communication at this time where they have heightened anxiety?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a really important time to be saying, how's it going, in lots of different ways. So maybe a weekly 3-question survey is really helpful. How's it going? What's going great? What needs to go better? How can we help? Very general things that can help us get a pulse of it, so parents feel heard, so we can see things before they become bigger issues. Parents are pretty willing, I think, in most cases, to share how these things are going, especially when it's so intense at home right now. So I think it's really important to, for sure, hear what's going on, but I also think it's really important to lead right now in terms of the culture, the feel, just the general attitude and disposition with which we're going through this. So we got to be real. We can't pretend that nothing is going on and that everything is perfect, because it's not. But we also have a great pastoral opportunity here to know the truth of the gospel and to know that God is sovereign through all these things, and that we are communities of trust and communities where we care about each other and our needs, both big and small. So I think in the way that heads of school, directors of Christian life, principals, and teachers are leading, we can create the energy that we're hoping for. So I think, again, it's both proactive and reactive, right? We can really work to have the culture that we want, that this is healthy, that we can do this together, and we're going to get through it better. And we also need to be hearing a lot from our constituents.
I would jump in and say one just very simple thing, and some of you have probably already done this, but I know just yesterday my own, well, I have kids in 3 different schools, so it's even magnified right now.
Oh my goodness.
For trying to keep, I'm like, we need a spreadsheet. But one of the things my wife was saying is, so the teachers have all been really good getting things to the kids, but it's coming from all sorts of angles. And then she's like, I'm not sure who to ask about this question I have. Right. So if your school doesn't have a centralized place for parents to call when they're just not sure about who to go to, is there one place that they can, is there an email that they can send and get an immediate response? Is there a phone line they can call and somebody's going to answer it, which I know is hard because everybody's at home, but how can they get in touch with somebody with a fairly quick response if they're not sure who to go to? So communicate that central place.
That's fantastic. And Brian, how often do you think that schools should be communicating? Daily, weekly? What does that look like?
I think, your head and your leadership team know your school best. And so you would probably have a good sense of what will go over well. If you have a high touch culture, a daily email in the morning from somebody at the school, just to all families saying, hey, it's a devotional thought, maybe it's Katie was sharing, we want you to be in the Word today with your kids. Here's what you can use today. And hey, school's still going well, and look for updates in our weekly newsletter or whatever you have going on. If you feel like your families would be fine with every Monday morning email from somebody, that would be great as well. I like the school that did the state of the school address through Zoom. Maybe you want to do that once a week or every other week to do regular updates, and record those so that parents, if they do have to work or miss it somehow, can still access it and feel like they're staying up to speed.
That's great. Katie, did you have anything you wanted to add to that as far as communication?
Yeah, I mean, I think maintaining what you've been doing, I think is a big part of it. So if you've been communicating once a week, communicate once a week. Maybe change the structure of that and the order of that. But if that's a rhythm that you've established and that's a rhythm that you hope to return to, I think just continuing to do that, maybe changing some of the things in it. So maybe it includes a little video message in that email weekly, whatever it is. Maybe it includes whatever else it is, things that they can share on social media, whatever that might be. But I think trying to establish the normalcy as much as possible and know that they're getting a lot. So you're right, Brian. Teachers are sending things, which I'm so grateful that they're sending so much and that they're so prepared. So my student can do this completely on his own. At the same time, just ensuring that there's that that kind of that rhythm and the comfort that can come with that normalcy. I think it can go a long way.
That's great. Oh, yep.
I think this is a little bit related, but I think finding creative ways to either communicate or just letting your families know that your school is still there and things are still happening. So for example, I actually think it's going on right now outside of my window. My kids' school, the teachers decided to put a parade on today, and they're all in their own cars driving through the neighborhoods that are part of that school, and just letting kids come out and wave to their teachers so that they see them today. Like, that's a really creative and unique idea that they decided to do, and I think that's really cool. And so have people give you creative ideas and do it and live it up.
That's awesome. One question before we wrap up. This person is saying, I wonder if we need to consider every other week having teachers take off one day or half a day and work on contacting parents on a weekend day in place of it. Meaning leveraging your teacher's time during the weekend to reach out and give them some time off during the week. What are your thoughts on that, Katie?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I think the contact is really important, and I think teachers are going to certainly know when that is necessary. So I know, you know, depending on the schedule that you've set, depending on how much synchronous, how much asynchronous stuff is there, I think certainly that can be a priority. You know, I think it depends on what you're expecting of your students as well for that continuity of learning. So I think what's happening with the elementary school is probably substantially different than what's happening with 11th grade students right now preparing for advanced placement exams. And so they're going to need their teachers more than the elementary teachers are going to be, but certainly finding ways for them to do that. So where can you relieve some of their time to ensure that those touch points, those moments are continuing. And again, surprising people in a way that makes them think, wow, you know, this is better than I could have ever imagined.
That's great. We also have another question that just came in from Michael. Any thoughts on tuition breaks?
Yeah, I think this is a hard one. I think this is it's an important conversation for sure. And I think it has to be on a case-by-case scenario. I think, you know, in many of our schools, there hasn't been, and the majority of our families have not felt a substantial impact yet. Now, in every school, I would imagine many families are, but I think that there has to be that open communication and that trust so that when families are experiencing that, and maybe that is, you know, I was just with another principal who was saying, you know, in their executive committee meetings, they're talking about families who they know are stressed right now, and they're making that initial contact. How are you? How do you need us to help? So I don't think that that's necessarily a communication that can go out, of course, but I do think that considering that, you know, the principals know, the teachers know, and making sure that that communication is getting to a place so school, you know, the school can reach out and say, hey, we're here, don't worry, we've got you.
That's great. Well, wanted to give a couple of resources. Those of you that are on this webinar probably got the email from us a couple hours ago at Vanderbloemen. Our COO, Sutton Turner, and our CEO, William Vanderbloemen, will be going live on our Facebook page at 3 p.m. today to discuss how the Senate bill will have an effect on Christian schools, churches, nonprofits, and small businesses. Our COO has been watching it so carefully and is excited to share his thoughts with you. So you can go to our Facebook page, type in Vanderbloemen on Facebook, and or check out that email that we sent earlier today and join us. You can click get a reminder and it will inform you when it's time for us to go live. So I'm excited to learn from William and Sutton on this topic. I'll be hosting that. And then we'll also send out, we're working on a hub page for all of these resources so you can find all of this wonderful content to help you lead well during this time there on that resource page. And then again, we will be here, same time, same place next Wednesday with Jay Ferguson, who is the head of school at Grace Community School in Tyler, Texas. And then the week after that, we will be joined by Dr. Lynn Swanner, who's actually on this call. Hello, Lynn. And she's going to be talking about the future of education. She has committed much of her career to writing and talking about the mind shift. That's the name of one of her books. That has to happen in order for educators to really think innovatively about the future. And I am just really excited to hear about her thoughts of what we can take from this time of crisis and apply to the future of our schools. And then the week after that, we will have Stephen Zeal, who is a principal at Woodlands Christian Academy in Woodlands, Texas, and is now a lecturer and associate director of the finance program at Texas A&M. And so he will be sharing with us more on, Michael, similar to your question about tuition breaks. He's going to be kind of walking through kind of the nuts and bolts of how you should be thinking about your financial health of your organization. And as you have to make some of those hard leadership decisions about restructuring, he'll be able to answer a lot of those questions. So Brian, before we say goodbye, could you pray for Katie and CESA and all of our educators that are on this webinar today?
Absolutely. I'm going to pray. I received a message from institution I used to work at to a group of us, and in it shared the sermon that C.S. Lewis preached in 1939, learning in wartime. And I'd encourage you to read it. I mean, it's different, but very wise words in it. And in it, C.S. Lewis just refers to that we're only encouraged to seek our daily bread. It's all we can ask for. The present is the only time in which any duty can be done or any grace received. And so I know that we're scrambling and thinking forward and trying to figure things out, and we should, but also remember we pray for our daily bread. And so let me pray for you all and for our schools. Heavenly Father, thank you that you still sit on the throne and that we can rest in that promise at all times, even in the midst of crisis response, of damage control, of what seems like a chaotic world at times. And but we remember you are not surprised, that you are sovereign, that you sit on the throne, and that you care for each and every one of us. You care for our families, you care for our schools, you care that the mission of Christian education needs to continue as we raise up young minds to love and serve you. And there's many schools that are experiencing difficulties. I pray, Lord, that you would meet each and every one of them in their place of need. Families who are struggling, you would meet them in their places of need. And God, give wisdom and courage to school leaders across the country as they seek you first and seek what they should be doing for their schools, for their communities. Above all, Lord, let us be a light in this time. May people see the truth and the gospel through this difficult time. May people be drawn to you and to your word like never before. And may we just glorify you in all of our work, in all of our thoughts, in all of our speech. Bless the work of our hands, God, today and in the future. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. And Katie, how can school leaders who are listening today, many of the folks listening, as I'm looking at the names, are connected with CESA, but for those who might not have ever heard of CESA or want to learn more about it, how can they find out more?
Well, I'd love to talk to you one-on-one, so you can certainly email me, KWIENS@cesaschools.org. Happy to do that. Also visit our website, cesaschools.org, to find out why we were started, what we're all about, how we're different, and my contact information can be there. You'll see a list of schools under the schools tab. It's awesome to connect with people that you know that are member schools, because they're able to talk to you about their experience with CESA and why they're part of it. But I'd love to chat with you. Love to get you connected with some of our events and kind of with this movement.
Excellent. And if there's anybody who's listening who just needs to talk to somebody, Brian Jensen is here and standing by. I am too, but you'd probably rather talk to Brian, who's been in the education trenches. So email me, holly@vanderbloemen.com, and I would love to connect you directly with Brian. While he's usually on planes, he is at his home in the Woodlands, Texas with his 4 kids. So is volunteering his time to get on the phone with you, pray for you, talk with you, just be a listening ear. That's what we're here for during this time. And we're just looking forward to being your support system and walking with you through this crisis. Katie, thank you for all that you do and the champion that you are for educators across the country. We love working with you and are cheering you on from the sidelines.
Thank you guys. Love Vanderbloemen and appreciate how you guys are leaning into this. Thanks.
All right, everybody. We'll see you this time next week. Thank you so much.
Bye.